And I'm just going to mute folks here. Hang on, let Leslie into the room. Okay. Great. Well, I appreciate everybody joining. Last week we did some of New York City and the 1939-40 World's Fair in photos. And this week we're going to start with a movie of it. And I've mentioned in a couple prior talks that I've been jumping big time into movie restoration as a hobby. And just warn everybody in advance, it is just another rat hole in which you can go down to and find infinite ways to spend an infinite amount of time. But it's been gratifying. You know, at some point you got to get into the, okay, close enough is good enough syndrome. But I was able to buy this film a couple weeks ago on eBay, and it was kind of fascinating to work on. Restoring it was a bit of a challenge because it was by far the dirtiest film that I've ever encountered and having to work with. When I clean these films, I use a solution called PEC 12 and cleaning pads called PEC pads. And they're really great. They do a great job of loosening up surface dirt on the film and giving it some lubrication in that. And this film, it's about 200 feet of film. It took 8 of these PEC pads, and normally in a 200-foot thing of film, I might go through 1 or 2 of them. And I just sat there and more dirt kept coming off and more dirt kept coming off. And you start worrying, oh my God, I hope I'm not taking off any of the real film itself. But this chemical is rated or made for just that. But it was a real effort. And even there then, and I'll show after I show the film, just a sample of you know, what had to be done and what we call post-production afterwards. But this was basically several rolls of 50-foot reels spliced together. So I think they're a little bit out of order because we're going to be on an airplane. We're going to fly into New York. We're going to see some of the World's Fair. We're going to go back to New York Municipal Airport, which we now call LaGuardia. Then we're going to go into Times Square. Then we're going to go back to the World's Fair. Then we're going to go to Times Square. I didn't make any effort to put them all in any correct order. I wasn't going to mess with the original splices, but I could have done it digitally, but I figured what the heck, this way it breaks it up so you get some variety. So let me jump over here to sharing it. It's a silent film, so I'll try to give some narration as we go along to it. And so did everybody see a picture of the from the plane window now? Okay, let me just bring it back to the beginning here. So if you're able to recognize some parts of it, I would love to hear of where we are. It starts that we're flying along over a river, and I imagine most of these places are totally built up by now. And I was looking at it, and as soon as I saw the engine, I said, oh my goodness, that's a DC-3. So it tells me that I've been spending way too much time with aircraft, but there I saw that part of the, I think it's the supercharger sticking up. We come into an airport, can't quite make out the name of the airport. Some old Piper Cubs and other tail draggers are sitting outside the airport. And then we're back in the air. Again, I don't know the river or if anybody recognizes the bridge down below. If you do recognize it, just throw it in chat and I can try to match it up later on. Big monument or tower of some kind there. And now we're at Washington Airport, today known obviously as Washington National Airport, sign in the background for Texaco, some baggage carts up in the front. Then we're taking off, we get some views of Arlington National Cemetery. Over there is where we could find the tomb of the unknown soldier, the mast from the USS Maine down below. Washington Monument in the tidal basin. This film, by the way, is from 1940. I was able to date it with some of the events showing at the fair, and the movie marquees that we'll see in Times Square. So now we arrive in New York. Unfortunately, a little bit overexposed in this one section. And he went right at night to the World's Fair. So Gay New Orleans dated it for me. It was a show held there with dancing gals. And then they had a nice fireworks show over the Fountain of the Nations. And this is right where the lagoon, I guess it was actually called the Lagoon of Nations. It's right where the Pool of Industry was built for the '64 World's Fair, still sitting in Flushing Meadows Corona Park today. So I feel like we should all be going, ooh, ah, you know, just for some color commentary, but we get to see our fireworks for a few minutes. It does always lose something without the thump of the mortars going off, doesn't it? And this only lasts a moment more. By the way, I apologize for the worldsfairphotos.com at the bottom. I may want to eventually do something with this and put it on a DVD or something like that, a Blu-ray, and figured people would be grabbing it for free off the internet. That's the National Cash Register, giant register. We can't quite see how many were there, but interesting to see it light up. So now we're in, obviously, Times Square. A hack stand, 4 taxi cabs, no parking. The pause it refreshes, Coca-Cola. And I just got a kick again. We talked last week about, you know, every car is black except the taxis, and obviously yellow cabs are a big thing. We're going to see all sorts of familiar signs. So here's some of the theaters. Oh, we went right back out to New York Municipal Airport, LaGuardia today. This was a brand new airport at that point in time, major thing for New York. Excuse me, because beforehand, you had to fly into Jersey, and Mayor LaGuardia, when he bought a ticket to New York, was not happy to go to Jersey, so he ordered the building of the airport. Flags we talked about last week in front of Ford being just general pictographs. 48-star flag. And the Trilon and Perisphere. The computer did a pretty good job getting out the dirt. Unfortunately, scratches or another vertical scratches that go on for a long period are more of a challenge. So, but it gives it that old vintage film look. New York City Pavilion, still in the park today. He or she was obviously quite taken by the Trilon. AT&T Pavilion. One of the murals over one of the pavilions going in. Again, all these were destroyed when the fair was taken down. That statue was a copy of one that was on the roof of the AT&T headquarters building. Speed statue in the transportation area. And the mural over on the communications building. Here you can see it says Maritime and Communications. Again, that dates it to 1940 after the ship-shaped Maritime building was abandoned for this year of the fair. State flags. For those of us that go to the park, we know how breezy it can get out there at times. That's why the Trilon and Perisphere had to be engineered to withstand a potential hurricane. the Elements fountain that's right inside one of the two subway stations that came out to the fair. This was interesting. They're coming off the subway, so it must have been really interesting to get on a subway train and see all these kids in their band uniforms coming on in. Of course, you know, those of us that rode the New York City subway, nothing should surprise you after a while. Artwork on the side of one of the buildings. France had a major pavilion at the fair, and they also had one for the French overseas exhibits. There's the Lagoon of Nations, very windy day, so it's really spraying along quite a bit. The Federal Building in the background, France. Great Britain in the foreground and Italy in the back. Somebody buying souvenirs, a lot of them. And all the well-dressed people. Poland, this was along a plaza where all the individual countries could get small little pavilions if they wanted. Well, we're looking at the Japan pavilion here. It was left after the fair ended in the hopes that it would be a permanent part of the park, but with the anti-Japanese fervor following Pearl Harbor, it was vandalized and destroyed. We're back down into Times Square. The person who shot this obviously liked things that went way into the air. And again, this is great old timing of stuff. Eddie Rochester in person, the McFarlane twins, whoever they were, and extra Red Skelton. So it's all a matter of, you know, who gets top billing as your career is on your way up or your career is on your way down. But yeah, the star of Jack Benny's radio show, Eddie Rochester. Hell's a Poppin', Olsen and Johnson, a big stage show going on at the Winter Garden. Just a nice view of all the various signs and that. If you notice a little Trilon and Perisphere in the center background, we'll see that coming up in just a second. Long shot at this guy standing out there. He must have been one of our visitors. The International Cafe in the background, Bond. Oh, there's the Trilon and Perisphere. This was a information center built in the middle of Times Square for the 2-year run of the fair. They'd give you Sloppy Joe's drinks. It's interesting. If anybody knows where that is, let me know. The only Sloppy Joe's drinks I can find is in Key West. The Baker's Wife show on the left. Van Cortlandt Hotel. I have to look up and see how many of these old hotels still exist. Jack Dempsey's Bar and Grill, famous fighter. He would come out to the 39 World's Fair and do autograph sessions out there. My grandfather was a big fan of his. Radio City. This one, I don't quite know where it is. Sorry, this is pretty dark right here. I probably need to think about taking this out, but it's a giant globe inside a building. If I really bump up the lighting when I scan it, you can not really make out much more of the background. And all of a sudden we're going to see, looking from the inside to the outside, and you can see some of the Art Deco type of structure of the building. But if anybody knows where this particular thing was, I was trying to figure out if it was the Hayden Planetarium or, yeah, here's the inside looking out. So if anybody does recognize it, please do let me know. Back out to the airport, TWA and United Airlines, both flying DC-3s. There's TWA in the background there. Their transcontinental service. And starting her up. I don't know if the mail delivery is here yet or not. Whoops, meant to hit the mute button. By the way, the plane that we saw that said transcontinental on it and starting up, you can go online and the serial number showed up on it. And again, it was a DC-3. And when World War II broke out, it was ended up being taken over by the British government and flown for a number of years on cargo supplies. So World War II obviously had a major disruption on air travel that not only could you not go to Europe easily, but you couldn't go anywhere in the US because the government took most of the planes. So the DuPont Pavilion, the wonderful world of chemistry. And again, a fascination with things that go up. When you see so many of these things over and over and over in black and white, photos, it's fun to finally put it together and see which parts that were blue and red. Elgin Watches had a great pavilion. You could bring your watch in and compare it to an Elgin watch, and they'd show you how much more accurate an Elgin watch was. I'd love to get one of those mobiles. I'm thinking of trying to figure out how to build one and put it in my backyard. With the wind that we get here, would do well. Oh, that's the amusement area I mentioned last week. Very hard to find pictures of it, and then a day later I find color movies of it. Streets of Paris, big show from Michael Todd, Abbott Costello, the headliners. It changed throughout the run of the fair. Different people came and starred. This statue is over at the New York City Pavilion. I'm sorry, New York State. Getting a portrait done. Now, we have a lot of Frank Buck. Frank Buck, a super popular guy. Here he has a trained chimpanzee, but he supplied animals to almost all the zoos around the world. And he had an exhibit going on simultaneously at both the 1939-40 New York World's Fair and the Golden Gate Exposition out in San Francisco. So whoever was taking these was quite smitten by the animals. He's having a good time. We're going to see more of the at the shows. Probably plays about as well as I would. And it had a seal display there. They had a whole giant exhibit, and we're going to see the monkeys in a second. The monkeys were quite noisy, they said, particularly at feeding time. Newspaper and magazine articles of the time talked about how they set up an earthly howl. And you could go for a lion or elephant ride. They actually would parade them through the World's Fair grounds for publicity, trying to get everybody, just like the Pied Piper, to follow them back to Frank Buck. So you can imagine if you're a kid and all of a sudden the guy goes by and, who wants an elephant ride? Daddy, Daddy, I want one. And next thing you know, Daddy's buying a ticket in to go see Frank Buck. Here's the monkeys. Again, I think he had they said close to 1,000 of them on this giant man-made monkey mountain. And when they came out to feed them several times a day, they evidently went quite wild for it. the ever popular monkey smoking a cigarette. And that's the end of that. So hope folks enjoyed it. Let me just stop this here for 1 second. And just let me pull up another movie real quick, 1 second. I just thought folks might like to see a little bit of what it looks like to bring one of these things back to life. So let me just share the screen here. Share a screen. So let me get it going here. Okay, share. Basically, the way the scanner works is it takes a still picture for every frame of the movie and then combines it into a movie form. The picture on the left is obviously the unrestored one. You can see how it shimmies and moves around a little because there was shake into the cameras. They were not fully registered as, say, a 35mm camera might be. So you get a little bit of camera shake. You also get dirt. You can compare the version on the left or the right. What the restoration software does, it looks at each still image, compares it to the next one and the following one. So the one before, the one after, and it looks for pieces of dirt that have popped up and only on one frame. If there's a piece of dirt that lasts for more than a frame, it tends to last, which is why the vertical scratches, or they're on frame after frame after frame. But it goes through, this 17-minute film took about 2 hours to process through the software. It also does a good job on restoring some of the colors. You can see the difference. There's kind of a pinkish or reddish cast on the Trilon and Perisphere there on the left-hand side. But it does to me, a really remarkable job, particularly if it's free software. So again, if any of you have your own home movies and you're thinking about getting into restoring them, I'd be more than glad to tell you more about the software, where to get it, and free is always good. It does a pretty nice job in bringing things back. So again, you can see all the dirt in the sky here. Most of it's gone over here. So anyway, that's the movie. Let me stop this. And yeah, Derek G says vertical scratch software, removal by software, very difficult. There is a company that does it. They have a really nice software package, and it's $10,000. And then they have an annual maintenance fee on it of about $3,000. I figure for $10,000 the first year and $3,000 that year, every year after, I will just get used to vertical scratches. So the vertical, the free software, it's called Film 9, F-I-L-M 9, and it's really great. It uses an underlying engine called AviSynth, and AviSynth is a script-based film restoration language, and I have AviSynth as a standalone program, and the scripts are pretty complicated, and you can do some really amazing stuff. I found out that Film 9 does 99% of what AviSynth does on its own, but it has a graphical front end. For whatever reason, it also runs faster than if you just run AviSynth as a normal thing. But if you look for Film 9, there's a site really good on film restoration called Doom9, DOOM9.org. And they have links on how you can download it all there. And it's really great. Like I said, it's free. It takes a little thing like everything else, a learning curve the first time you go through it. But you set your options, how aggressive do you want to get with dirt removal? How aggressive you want to get with color restoration? Speaking of that, let me just give you an idea what Film 9 can do. A friend of mine did a transfer of a movie from Walt Disney World, a souvenir film. And let me bring this up here. Well, where is the one I did? And he had it scanned by somebody else, and the colors on it were really shot. So let me go to share screen here, and I put this through Film 9. You can see his scanned version on the left, and then Film 9's on the right. It took me 4 passes through Film 9 to get the colors back as much as I did. And it's not perfect. Some of the reds act a little strange at times. But basically, it went through did a little restoration, did a little more, did a little more. You get to the point of diminishing returns after a while. I also did a little film stabilization on it. So again, there was a little camera shake on it, and um, took that down. There was also some dirt on it, and I was able to do some more digital restoration. But again, that's the film on the left, pretty red, and on the right-hand side, it came out, a lot more colorful and a lot more lifelike than the original. So again, super encourage people to get into Film 9. And if they're, it says, do you need a high degree graphics processor? No, a standard PC will do a really good job on it, Bruce. I have two PCs. Well, actually, I got four of them here in my office. But my main one is a very high-end one, and the one I do most of the film stuff on is sitting behind me, and it's an older one that I built probably about 8 years ago. And I just loaded on there, set it cranking away. 2 hours later, a 50-foot roll takes about 30 minutes or so to crank through it. But I've also just done it on a laptop just to see how well it works. It's basically never really maxes out the CPU, processor. Sometimes on a laptop, I found the disk drive was more of a limiting factor. Folks should be able to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask any questions live. Let me just see the other, other chats here, if anybody recognized any of those buildings. Yep, the same overwater approach to LaGuardia. Things don't change, huh? Carolyn got a kick wearing white pants in the subway today. Yeah, good luck, right? Cliff mentioned Sloppy Joe in Havana. Hemingway hung out there. Yeah, I thought it would show up. Sloppy Joe's drinks. Nothing in New York showed up. Bruce was wondering if the Globe could be the Daily News building, and I was wondering that too. The Globe that's in the lobby today is different from this one, but of course things could change all over the place. But just if anybody knows, that could be sure. Just reading through here. Derek is going to start robbing banks to afford the software to take out vertical line scratches. When you do that, if I could borrow it from you, I would love you to take it out. And let's see, Randy, let me let him in here. Do I have any more film of the 39 amusement area? I do, but it's in black and white, and I need to restore it. I jumped the color line up here. I have literally crates of films waiting to get done, and as Carol knows, more and more stuff keeps coming in the door all the time. But when I saw the chance to get the fair in color, I wanted to go for it. I have another roll of color film that I did on my old scanner that I wasn't super thrilled with, and I have to go find it in one of my boxes and go do it. And I don't remember if that has any more of the 39 amusement area in it. So any other thoughts, comments on the film, or would you like to see more still pictures from the fair? Still pictures? Okay, nobody's saying no? Okay, let me go and get those ready 1 second. Okay. All right, let me share the screen here. Share screen. Okay, so we should all be looking at a familiar site, the National Cash Register, giant cash register. Down below, they had exhibits of all the things NCR made, which was not just cash registers, but also adding machines and other odds and ends. Off to the right was a vertical Ferris wheel. You would go up, go over, come back down. This one I really got a kick out of. The New England states joined together. You can see the sign off on the background. That was New Hampshire, Connecticut, Vermont. When you think about lobsters, first thought would be Maine. Well, Maine had its own state pavilion, but this was an amazingly intricate seaport here with a sailing ship in the middle of it, the Yankee, And you know, when you get one of these great old negatives, you can just get an amazing amount of detail pulled out of these. So I got a real kick of just all the fishing floats up on the wall of it, and in the back here you can see a little sign for New York, New England information, that sort of thing. They saw this in the movie. It's called The Shot Putter. This was over by the New York's amphitheater, looking over towards Chrysler Motors. So again, we're just hopping over all over the place. Two pavilion pylons here guiding people into that section of the fair. Into the lake amusement area, the Great White Way. This was a great one. You could get your name printed in headlines while you wait. And you can see some examples down below here. And then off to the left, the tacky sort of stuff that was so popular in 39 and 40 that Robert Moses was absolutely determined not to let occur again in 64, 65. But, you know, game of chance, can you throw the ball? You got to get it ball into one of those holes there. And if you do, you could knock the girl out of bed. So great fun. More about fire displays. We saw some of these last week. And these are again by Paul Manship, Moods of Time. They were a wonderful set of sculptures that he did in the fountain. You can date this picture to 1939 because by 1940, all the fountains here had softened the gypsum and the framework for the pieces. So they had to put steel rods to hold them up because they were sagging. But Manship did some wonderful work. He had the giant sundial, Time and Fates of Man. He had a number of these works, and some of these have survived. None of these pieces survived the fair, but his maquettes and some other copies he made of these have survived. I'm a real fan of Manship's work. And more of the sculptures. Again, the water took its time on these, and they didn't last. 69,000 people wandering around that day. Fascinating exhibit. I mean, if you're in New York City and you go into the New York City Pavilion, you get to see where your tax dollars go. Actually, this is where your tax dollars come from. So much of it comes from real estate, so much of it comes from the federal government, so much of it comes from other odds and consumer tax, basically sales tax, that sort of thing. But they had this whole big display on where the money went and then came from and then where it went. And again, exciting government at work. Railroads on display. I would have absolutely died to see this one. Giant show. We saw some of the trains last week on outdoor display. A gigantic model railroad inside the pavilion, and then a big live show several times a day with locomotives under power. Joe the Strap Hanger is the name the folks in New York gave him. The USSR Pavilion, again, dating it to only 1939. This was all ripped out and sent back to Russia and replaced by another area called the American Commons for 1940. Con Edison, the giant facade here with the fountains going up, and inside the City of Light, amazing miniature model of New York City showing how everything was powered by Con Ed, including the subways down below. If you zoom in on this, you can again see that this is 1940. There's a map. They had changed so many things between 1939 and 1940 that they put these signs all over the place because people came in expecting to see what they had seen in 1939. In some cases, entire sections of the fair were changed, like the USSR becoming American Commons. And in others, things have been moved around, consolidated, and other things added in. More fire engines on display. Ford had a big pavilion. There's one of the cars getting the test drive. And another view of the ramp that they had. Their thought here, by the way, was just like General Motors and others, that we were all going to have two-story cities at this point in time. That pedestrians would be walking down below. You might have local traffic for parking in that down below, but to get from point A to point B, you'd be up above. So this was built as a corkscrew ramp to demonstrate just how easily it was going to be to get from your local streets up to your multi-town streets up on the upper level. So it hasn't quite taken off, but that was the big concept for highway design at the time. One of the series of statues ringing the Trilon and Perisphere. This was called the Star Pylon, and had, again, beautiful light that lit up there at night. But we can see one of the information booths over to the left. When the fair was demolished, the Star Pylon was one of the last things that was taken down, not because it had any artistic value. It was basically so the construction demolition crews could orient themselves on what pavilion they were coming to haul the debris away from. So just like in 64, they left a number of the towers up. They did the same thing in 39 as mileposts for the demolition. A circus type funhouse mirror. People have taken lots of pictures of themselves. We're inside Futurama. This is looking at one of the cities of the future. Again, up here on these roads were all the roads to get from point A to point B, and underneath it would be the pedestrian areas and where you would park to go into all the shops. Atmospheric view, USSR over here. And great view here of the Trilon, Perisphere, and this is the ramp that went up between them, the Helocline. So basically you would pay your money, you would get to go up into the show called Democracy inside the Perisphere. You'd come walking out across the bridge here, take a quick hike through the Trilon and come arching your way back down. Mentioned last week how gypsum was used instead of concrete, and you can see the ripple effects on the building here where it's bubbling out. They had constantly to put work crews out, and a windstorm came up and ripped a number of sheets off the Trilon onto the ground, luckily not hurting anybody, but they had to bring in, do some emergency scaffolding and fix it during the season. Again, fantastic details you can get out of a negative. If we zoom in on this particular one, you can see their motto, and then down below this article of the Constitution of the USSR, and over here even a sign telling you what's going to be shown in the cinema that particular day. Different sort of fire truck, a rescue truck, and then a higher profile underneath so it could go over debris in that. Searchlights up top, a hose for pumping water, multi-purpose rescue vehicle. The Astronomer. Again, none of these survived. U.S. Steel did an interesting thing. Years before the Pompidou Center in France got such controversy for putting its support on the exterior of the building, that's exactly what U.S. Steel did. And it was wonderful. I mean, if you're going to build a building and hide all the steel inside, nobody would realize all the wonderful things steel did. But putting these steel beams arching up and across lets you keep everything inside here totally open as support columns. And that was a very novel concept at that time. More rescue trucks. George Washington, again, talked about last week, hopes of keeping it after the fair or replacing with a bronze copy. That did not work out. Mentioned that some of the states had their own pavilions. You can see Missouri here in the state of Washington. A number of them copied their original or older versions of their state houses and reproduced them from some cases, the actual plans, other cases just using historical photos. Another one of Manship's pieces will work here. And again, great detail in the background. You can go to the Mayflower restaurant inside the pavilion. A snorkel truck. Mentioned earlier, again, the New England states here. This is the building for Massachusetts, but the ship here, the Yankee, people actually swore that they could feel it bobbing up and down on the man-made lake, and it wasn't a real ship. It was built, anchored solidly to the ground. But got some neat pictures between the years of the fair. They, always doing photo ops of trying to keep the fair in people's mind. And it's two gals having a snowball fight up on the deck of the Yankee. Out to the transportation areas, Riders of the Element, done by an artist, Clement Chester Beach. So these are just light towers, so give it some sense of movement. The DuPont looks a lot different in black and white than we saw it in color, doesn't it? Just a nice night view of the fair. Westinghouse. Last week we saw some of the Westinghouse, their prediction of plastic skirts. This was inside the pavilion as you came in, standing at the top of the escalator. And all around the rest of it here, they had things on how Westinghouse was so involved in many things. You would look and say, steel, Westinghouse is an electric company. Well, they had all sorts of electric furnaces and kilns and things and motors that drove the steel factories. American Jubilee, a giant stage show added for the 1940 season. Billy Rose's Aquacade has been such a big hit during the 1939 season that it was inevitable that somebody else would come by and try to repeat the success. American Jubilee was not as successful. It was a success. It did make money, and they actually started casting for bringing it on the road to do a touring company of the U.S. And they had announced their initial dates and everything. And then they finally sat back and said, look at the size cast. Just taking these people from town to town or auditioning in every city, maybe it's not going to work. And that they pulled the plug at the last minute, but it came very close to a touring company. This is the subway we saw all those band kids coming in from on the movie. In Westinghouse, again, we're going back around, jumping out of order. They had a mural here on how everything was changing through electricity. So in this particular time between 1886, which I think was the founding of Westinghouse, and 1900, they had brought in things, the idea of the electric light bulb was an invention for that point in time, a dynamo generating electricity, power coming from going over waterfalls and that. And they took you through each of the times up to modern day where you had radios and predictions for the future of robot servants, that sort of thing. Railroads on parade. They started with transportation on horses, then they brought in the covered wagon. And that was all great and good, but here comes the train. The train's going to make things good for us. More of Westinghouse. Again, by 1900 and 1939, current day, we have spotlights for airplanes, and we have airplanes, and we have giant electric grid systems and all sorts of other wonderful things. Nice view of the Westinghouse lobby. Very sexist, because if you look at the women, they're not leading any industry, any business, anything. They're just doing the cooking, cleaning, kitchen work, and taking the kids to school. So, there was no hope whatsoever that women were going to be titans of business or anything. And then down below, all these wonderful things that you're going to get in your modern electric kitchen. Looking up the escalator, we were looking down from one of them before. Right over here, you can see the sign for Electro. The robot was standing up here, and his robotic dog. And again, just more of their dated mural going around. Here's our woman of the future with her modern cellophane skirt, and Electro the robot, where they called him Moto Man. A giant governor. This would actually swing around and give a sense of movement to it. And looking up at the tower outside, the Westinghouse Tower. Mentioned last week about the 39 fair being renewed for 1940. So here's Mayor LaGuardia proudly announcing that the fair will be back. And again, no secret, I'm a big fan of trains. This was a large negative that restored. It was in dreadful shape. And I spent way too much time on it, but it was such a wonderful looking piece of equipment that I just felt had to go and put some time and effort into it. So massive machinery. Tryon Perisphere, again, the heliplane going down. all these murals. I cover a number of them in my book. You know, there was a big one on Johnny Appleseed and other things, but these were all people out of history. So right here we have Paul Bunyan with his axe, and here's Babe, the big blue ox. Outside the fairgrounds, again, you can see how big the USSR Pavilion was. They were really trying to make a statement. Well, they made sure that, although it looks smaller here, they made sure that the Trilon was taller. And then just to prove a point, at the ending weeks of the fair, they flew a giant American flag on top of it, just to make the point that America was bigger than Russia in every way. Abraham Lincoln, statue that got some controversy because, again, he's the great father and, you know, taking care of all these poor kids through his benevolence. Fountain, this is the fireworks show. We saw a bit of it in color in the film. You know, obviously black and white here, but it really caught the rockets quite well. Along the Plaza of the Nations here, again, what a lot of the countries did was they had a small display inside these pavilions of the government that could only afford to have a small pavilion. And a lot of these bigger ones were actually sponsored by industry out of the towns. Romania, I believe, was sponsored by the government, but this was all stone quarried in Romania, brought here to the United States. Romanian artisans came and built it again in place. And that was done for quite a few of the foreign pavilions, Japan Pavilion, others, that they would build them overseas, take them apart, bring them back here, disassemble them or reassemble them. Coming out of Con Ed, you see some circles in here in the waterfall. Those were little niches that you could sit inside in a window and just get your picture taken or enjoy the sight of thousands of gallons of water pouring right past you. Mentioned the Trilon and Perisphere needed a lot of maintenance work, and this was taken during the fair. The hatch up in the top, and these guys are coming down on a safety rope and fixing some of the gypsum so it doesn't peel off. This one I got a kick out of. I mentioned this in my book. They have this baboon sitting in the center and all these other great apes around laughing. And this was basically called the chairman of the board and his advisors. So it was somebody's satirical play on business leaders and the fact that they're all a bunch of chattering, nattering apes, and it's all very confusing. Meadow, I'm not quite sure it's how it's pronounced, had a great concession. They were the official film sales site for film at the 39 World's Fair, and they recaptured that, and they were the official film sales place for the 64, 65 World's Fair. So when you see all these pictures that people were taking at the fair, if it was on Kodak film and they didn't bring it with them, this is where they had to go and buy it. They probably did very, very well. Charlie McCarthy, huge hit. I always got a big kick out of the fact Charlie's on the radio. So here you have a ventriloquist making a big thing that he's a ventriloquist on the radio. And I'd like to suggest that even I could be a great ventriloquist on the radio, because you're not going to see me, right? You know, but he was a huge hit, and he came out here and they had a pre-recorded thing Edgar Bergen did, and you can see Charlie's mouth was hinged here. And Charlie would pretend he was talking to people on the telephone and address people down in the crowd. And it was a huge thing for Chase Sanborn Coffee. They were his radio sponsors. And again, hard for us to relate to 80, we're coming on 90 years later for this thing. But this whole thing of Charlie got huge press coverage that you could go out to the World's Fair and you could talk to Charlie McCarthy. And people lined up in droves to do it. Schlitz, a giant beer tent. For some reason, it's done with a giant palm leaf motif. But they were in a big competition to see who had the biggest bar. Schaefer won. Some of the state houses mentioned, reconstructed from photos or original blueprints. Johnny Weissmuller was a big part of the fair in '39. You can see somebody's etched it down below here. This is the Billy Rose Aquacade mentioned last week. They had a live orchestra. half of it over here, half of it on the other side, so you get you know, a nice stereo effect. But Johnny came out and he did a big performance. In 1940, he moved out and did appearances because Billy Rose had another show out in the Golden Gate International Exposition for 1940, and he brought Johnny Weissmuller out there to perform. Johnny was replaced at the 39 World's Fair by Buster Crabbe, so they another famous Olympic athlete. And this was George Gobel, the comedian. He had this section here of vintage New York. You look at that attendance up there on the cash register, 238,000 people there on this particular day. I mean, that's massive. If you want to put it in perspective, that at Disneyland, when we would get into the 70,000 range, we started going, uh-oh. When we got to the 80,000 range, we go, you start better sending people in, you know, on the back ways through the employee areas. And if you got to 100,000, you were turning people away with a post. We actually gave out postcards that said, "Why don't you go visit Knott's Berry Farm? We're closed." So they had 238,000 people, and that's at the end of the day. You know, who knows how many more came in after this this point in time. I mentioned in my book, this is an interesting one, the Maryland Pavilion. If I didn't have this picture, I couldn't prove to you Maryland was at the World's Fair. It doesn't appear in any of the guidebooks. It doesn't appear in any of the maps of the World's Fair. And the only news articles that I could find in newspaper archives were about how the governor of Maryland came to the World's Fair with a contingent to visit their pavilion. Why they don't end up in either the 39 or the 1940 guidebook is beyond me, but somebody someplace had it in for Maryland and didn't give them any publicity. France, I mentioned, had two pavilions. They had the major one, which had a gigantic picture window and restaurant overlooking the Lagoon of Nations. This is the France Overseas Pavilion. And this was all their various colonies, you know, French Polynesia, down in the Congo, that sort of area. So all about how benevolent they were raising people around the world. Nice fountain here of a mermaid. General Motors. So here you have two things. You have up top the line going to see Futurama 2, the biggest attraction at the 39 World's Fair, and Futurama 2 being the biggest attraction at the 64 World's Fair. Down below, you can see the entrance for the General Motors exhibits. So if you wanted to go and see all the wonderful things that General Motors is doing, but you didn't want to wait on the line to go see Futurama, you could go and see the exhibits. And in this particular case, it's interesting because these people are apparently not lined up for the exhibits. They're lined up here for the Futurama ride. And the guys here have to stop the line, let it go, and let it go across. So if you wanted to just go in and see the cars or see the General Motors you know, machinery, that sort of thing, come right on in. But look at that line. And this was a huge line, just in typical Disney fashion, more switchbacks and everything inside. But aerial shots just show them going way, way down the street, waiting to get in. Coming out of the Perisphere, walking over in that little bridge we saw going into the Trilon, and then here's the Helicline coming back down. And they had a statue here about all the freedoms that we have, and here we have the freedom of the press. Man's using an early Gutenberg type printing press down below. Mention this in my book. These were lamps, and inside you can see just barely where my mouse is, another one up here. They were full of goldfish. So they were called something like aqualators, and they lit up at night, and they bubbled along here with the fish coming along. I always would like to find out how many fish they had to go through during the time of the fair, because you start thinking New York City in summer gets pretty warm, and the sun coming down, this column of fish going up and down. My feeling the fish had quite a mortality rate, but that was the big attention draw. It was street lights full of fish. Lucky Strike cigarettes, you could go in. They would give you a free cigarette, which was great. You know, I mean, to try to get you hooked on smoking. But they also had an entire manufacturing facility inside that would make cigarettes right in front of you, roll them up, and they produced packs of cigarettes that had special World's Fair logo on it that you could were encouraged to buy a carton of them and send them to your friends. I've only seen one picture of one of the carton, not the carton. I've never seen the carton. I've seen one picture of one of the packs, but you know, one of those souvenirs that did not survive an awful lot, because when your friend sent you a free pack of cigarettes, you would open it up, smoke it, and throw it away, right? So not the sort of thing that survives a lot. Great Britain in the front again, Laguna Nations in the front, Italy way in the back. Again, railroads on display. Some of these trains were replicas, and others were rebuilt and brought in from museums for the fair. And just little odds and ends. This one here had a restaurant up top that was used to entertain VIPs and that. And then down below, we had another Gray's drugstore, soda fountain, and a fast food type restaurant down below. You could pay your money to go and have pictures taken of magazines, and you evidently had to be very quick. From what I read, is that the light would come on, the model would pose, and 15 seconds later, the light would go off, and then off to the right or left, another one would pose. But again, film at the time it needed a lot of light. So you can see any slight movement at all from the gal. She's a little bit blurred, where the caption's pretty sharp. But again, the Meadow photography people probably sold a lot of film by people going in for living magazine covers. And there was Sally Rand's Nude Ranch, and there were about half a dozen different things for people that wanted to get this sort of picture to send back home. And again, Robert Moses said, you're not going to get that in '64. This was kind of interesting one. I was approached by a number of organizations to get a shot of this. This is called a rotolactator. It's in the Borden Pavilion. And their whole idea was that you would put a cow here and milk it automatically. And it went on a rotating device. And that was not because the cows were made happier going in circles. It was just easier for you as the farmer to sit there, wait for the cow to come up, attach the pumps, let it go on its way, let the next cow come by, unattach the pumps, or whatever. But I helped National Geographic and some other news organizations with pictures because evidently not many people took pictures of the rotolactator. Just a general shot of Chrysler. AT&T, you have the Pony Express, the Indian lying in wait here. And they were talking again about, you know, how communications have always been popular, always been a necessity for the growth of America. But now with AT&T, you didn't have to worry that your message was going to get, or your messenger was going to get killed by waiting Indians. Gas pavilion, everybody was very used to doing gas for cooking, but this was where air conditioning was first coming out. We talked last week a bit about the use of gas for air conditioning. And again, if we zoom in on this, you can see here that you have a thing you can dine at the Flame restaurant. You look, take a peep into the mini kitchens, and you can visit Tiny Town of all sorts of miniatures here of you know, different things that were done with gas. Swift Meat was another interesting one. Just like you could watch cigarettes being made, you could watch hot dogs being made, and they would had an entire processing assembly line that they would bring in, you know, cuts of meat, cut them up, make hot dogs, put them in a case. And you could go and buy a set of hot dogs to take home with you. They came in special Swift packaging, which I've not seen any of that survive. Or you could go to the Swift restaurant and they would serve you a hot dog you had just seen made in front of you. Schaefer, very proud, the largest bar at the fair. The entire section of it out here was serving beer, and inside they, of course, showed you how it was made, and then they would sell you more beer. A statue of Walt Whitman. I'm not quite sure which pavilion this was outside of, but again, just being a geek, I get a kick if I zoom in. You can go and read this quite well, the whole saying of Walt Whitman here, Song of the Open Road. And I believe this statue, I did locate where this is moved to. This was made, if you look at it, it's made out of bronze. It was not plaster. It does survive. I don't recall off the top of my head where it is right now. Continuing the vein of build it and you can take it home with you, Goodrich Tires. You could walk in there and they had all the vulcanizing equipment and they would make a tire right in front of you and you could either take it home with you if you wanted, or more conveniently, they would arrange to have it delivered for you. So, you know, fascinating thing for, I don't know, does anybody know Goodrich Tires is still around? I know Goodyear Tires, but I don't know if Goodrich is still with us or not. Petroleum, inside a giant thing about how the pumps in the Midwest would take things in pipelines and take them over to petroleum stations and turn them into gasoline, kerosene, benzene, all the various forms. Everybody, of course, knew, you know, gasoline for their cars, but they were really big on all the cleaning chemicals and how you made plastics out of it, everything else. The American Jubilee Show again, you can see why taking this on the road would have been a bit of an effort. Just trying to move these sets around would have been a challenge. I'm sure it would have been a scaled down production. Post office had a big display there. You could go and get your stamps canceled with a special World's Fair cancellation. Billy Rose again. Massive, massive show. I mean, he was quite the showman, quite the impresario. All these gals that come marching down this giant flight of stairs out here ringing the stage. They would be swirling these multicolor stars around. The water ballet is going away under place. Band is playing. You can see the platforms up here and over here for high dives. The show was supposed to have been quite spectacular. This is Norway Day. The woman's dressed in Norwegian costume. She's actually standing at the Italian pavilion. But again, mentioned earlier, this was a great day. If you did Norway Day, everybody with Norwegian descent would come out to the fair. They'd have Norwegian dignitaries make speeches. They'd serve special Norwegian foods and that, but it really helped with the attendance coming into the fair. We're over at here, the Edison Institute exhibit was a big thing on all the various things that Edison had done for you. They had displays of generators inside. And if I remember the details, one of them was actually taken out of one of the first Edison power plants that had been built for the city of New York and was now on display here. Sad view, here's Chrysler. We saw it before, those towers mentioned. Here was the big semicircle. We were looking in from this direction into it before. And again, they left these things up, you know, as milestones for people to know which pavilion to tear down. Big exhibit of art in 1940. Oh, here we are. We're getting our hot dogs made right in front of us. We're got all the women in their white outfits and they're just making them and they're going down the conveyor belt. This is where all those courthouses, the state houses rather, were done here at the Court of States. Looking down from the train station, American art again over here. Johns Manville, come and put asbestos inside your house and you'll be modern like everybody else. Put asbestos in your car, put asbestos in your school. Back at 1939, 1940, nobody had any idea what asbestosis was or what the issues it was going to cause. So you could actually come out here to Johns Manville and they would give you a small piece of asbestos to take home with you. Building, happily, the Perisphere and Trilon are going up in this particular view, not coming down. If we zoom in on this one, you can see American Bridge Company, and they are the same ones that built the Unisphere for the '64 World's Fair. They also built many of the other pavilions, the Bell System at '64 and others. But that was just, here again, this is going to be the Perisphere going up. This column was in the center of it, and here's the steel framework for the Trilon off to the side. This looks like a giant stage show, but if you look closer, it's actually a giant set of miniature It's not a real circus. It was a miniature circus that was done with moving, not automatons, but not even audio animatronic figures, but whatever you would call them. They were mechanical devices. Florida, you'd swear you in Florida, wouldn't you? You don't see too many palm trees in New York. This was taken pre-opening of the fair. You could come in during the few months before the fair was open in '39 and take a tour of the fair and go home and tell everybody that it was worth coming and seeing. He was one of the guards keeping the crowds going. You can tell it was a gentler time. He doesn't have a gun. He has a whistle to keep everybody in line. This was one of those days with the crowds coming in. The Trilon has not quite been topped off yet, but they had very large crowds coming in. They weren't done several, it wasn't every day of the week. It was on certain selected weekend days and that when the construction crews were off, but got tremendous amount of pre-fair publicity. Again, railroads on parade. If I get a time machine, I know where I'm going. So anybody wants to go with me, bring a quarter and we'll see you at the show. The DeWitt Clinton Railroad. Again, this was a replica. It was not the real DeWitt Clinton, but this had been built for the 1933-1934 Chicago World's Fair and then brought out here. And this is the one we showed the movie in Chicago Rail Fair that Walt Disney came out and got to ride this, and Ward Kimball, one of his chief animators, said one of the top things his entire life was being able to be the guy running the locomotives, the DeWitt Clinton. And even 20, 30 years later, with everything the man had done, he still said that that was being a giant railroad buff. He just loved driving that train. More of the statues there at the fair and mural in the background. This is interesting. Kodak had exhibits. We've seen shots before, people sitting on the miniature Trilon and Perisphere, sitting on the reproduced parachute drop or whatever. This one doesn't show up too often for whatever reason, this cage full of people. But this was a brilliant thing by Kodak because you would come here and a Kodak, they had all sorts of Kodak photographers would happily take your picture and use your camera and your film that you got to develop yourself or have somebody pay to have somebody do it. And they would take as many pictures as you want and encourage, smile, turn left, turn right, you know. So sometimes you see, you know, they would get 4 or 5 shots in an area and, you know, that's going through a third of somebody's roll right there. But again, just fun at the Kodak exhibit. Over to the Great White Way. Again, the world has changed so much. Donuts, huge thing at donuts for the 39 World's Fair, where newspaper articles were actually covering how many donuts were sold. And I forgot what day it was. I think I mentioned in one of the books on what record number of donuts they sent at that time. But, you know, people might eat, you know, some sort of donut type thing at home, but this was the first idea of a mass-produced donut that you could go in and you know, buy it. And they had, they were smart. They did donut eating contests to see who could eat the most donuts. They would demonstrate the proper way to dunk your donut into a cup of coffee. And they had models that would walk through the place that would lean over and show you how to dunk your coffee. And again, amazing amount of publicity that they got for donuts. Inside the Sun Valley exhibit, I always got a kick. He must have known exactly how many barrels he could do because they had to put the LL on one barrel. And I guess if they had put 2 L's in there, that was just a little too far for him to do it. But man-made ice, and they did a big show out there. One of the model homes that you could go and get a tour of and go see, you could actually buy the plans of and build it at home. And they were furnished. I mentioned in my book how, I forget which car company it was, senior moment. They couldn't afford to build their own car pavilion for the World's Fair. So what they did was they arranged to put cars in all the driveways of all the model homes. And that was a great way. You don't have to build a big building, but everybody comes by and sees your cars. The houses rather were actual, you know, full-size houses with everything in it. They would have cutaway walls inside to show you how the plumbing was inside, how the insulation was done. The only thing they didn't have was a basement, because if they dug a basement, it would have gone into the trash that made up the landfill that the fair was built on top of. Over by the one of the bridges in the fair, in the background, you can see the tower for the League of Nations. But this was a sculpture garden somebody had done, and you have famous things from around the world, a volcano and that, castles, and in the back you have a miniature of Trilon, Perisphere, and Helicline. And this was an exhibit trying to convince you that you should build things in your garden and rock work. And the company that put this together just so happened they would sell you the rocks and stuff to go do it. Back over to New England. Again, we have the Yankee sitting on the side here, and then just the fishing village. We had looked closer at this building with the lobster sign before. This is one of the sort of things that things have changed mercifully so from World's Fairs. They would bring in families, American Indians, and they would live on the site during the period of time, showing how they're doing craft work and that sort of thing. But you know, unfortunately, basically putting human beings on display as a show. This was done by the Budd Train Company. Budd was very famous for making train cars. A lot of the sleeper cars and passenger cars you went on were done by Budd. This fountain was done to show that Budd could do anything with aluminum. They could bend it in all sorts of shape, and they had a very revolutionary way of welding the aluminum panels together. So they were showing here how they could not only get different sizes, but it could take the force of the water pouring down and encouraging people to come and use Budd for things other than just train cars. Chile, one of the international pavilions, and this was kind of interesting. We zoom here on the sign. 3 Chileans drove this car from Calera, Chile to the Chilean Pavilion, New York World's Fair, 12,000 miles in 8 months. You know, that's a heck of a drive, but back at that point when they did this, there were no highways to speak. Everything was dirt roads, and it was a heck of a adventure for them to get it there. If you look at the news articles of the time, they had a whole support team going through it. And I've always wondered, I don't think I've seen it mentioned, but I've always wondered exactly how many tires they must have gone through on their way to get there. Chrysler Pavilion coming down. Trilon and Perisphere coming down. This was about 6 months after the fair closed. This is inside the Perisphere during the fair. It's called Democracity. You got a great view of how the city of the future was going to be. All sorts of different things powering electricity and progress. Nice view from the Helicline looking out towards the Federal Pavilion in the background. This was interesting. This was the Fair Operations Pavilion. This was the nerve center for the fair. We had seen last week they built the Fair Administration Building, which was where all the executives worked. They had VIP lounges and that sort of thing. But this was actually on the fair site. So all the executives were in the one building. These were the people that actually ran the fair during the day. So if you needed, if you had a spill, something, one of the marching elephants took a dump or whatever, you would call over here to the Fair Operations Building, and then they would dispatch the crews. Your lights went out, they would dispatch the crews. Your plumbing broke, they would dispatch the crews. So there was no signage here really, encouraging you to come in. But this is where the fair was run out of on a daily basis. Again, from the Trilon Perisphere. And she has a very natty looking Peter Pan sortish hat. He probably got his at one of the Asian pavilions. Wooden boardwalk that went and ringed the Lagoon of Nations. This is interesting. It's some sort of major speech going on, but we have 3 it looks like young men. I think these were actually guys that came out of Morris Guest Midget Town, and they were outside in the fair. But you can see there's a giant speech. A lot of these things, this is opening day of the fair. in 1939, some celebrity or whatever giving a speech with the U.S. Pavilion in the background. So lots of people came to opening day. Unlike the 64 fair, where not so many people came to opening day because of all the threat of racial protests, and also in 64, it poured and it was a god-awful miserable day in New York. So we have the speed statue out here, communications and mural. And again, we saw that in the movie as the Marine Transportation and Communications for 1940. Carolina Perisphere underway. And this kind of gives an example. I use this in my book as an example why some of these statues couldn't be saved. We zoom in on it. This is 1940, just as the fair is ending. So you can still see it's the builders of the future. You make up the name of the sculpture. But look, unfortunately, the shape that the sculpture itself is in. Made out of gypsum, rain, snow over the 2 years have taken its toll. Could it have been salvaged? Yes. Did anybody have the money to salvage it? No. So unfortunately, they did not last. Court of Energy here. And again, mentioned the various sculptures that went outside the pavilions. Here we have Johnny Appleseed. He'd like to be going around reading his Bible, sowing his apple seeds, and you can see they're picking them here and harvesting them. Subway station and the Elements Fountain. Just some general views, modern street lights. Magic Mountain, not quite the same as the Magic Mountain that we have out here in California, but again, you could come up to the top and you could go take a ride down through it. Carrier air conditioning, done like an igloo. Come on in, we'll cool you off, and you can get one of these air conditioning systems for your business. Back at that point in time, home air conditioning was very, very, very rare. One of the, again, 1940 things that they did was they started putting in all these other villages. So everybody's watching a stage show down here. This is where we saw the, George Jessel had his village. You had Gay Paris, Gay New Orleans, rather. And again, we had the streets of Paris, big show in here, direct from Broadway. To put yourself in perspective where all this is, here's the New York City amphitheater off to the side here. And here's that shot putter statue that we mentioned before. Con Edison, I mentioned before how everything in New York's done with power. They would simulate daytime and nighttime, all these buildings lit up. But if you were standing here, you could also watch trains going through because electricity, of course, powers the New York City subway. Just a random ticket that was left. You could go either see New Orleans or Gardens on Display for a whole quarter. You could also, for 50 cents, take one of those Greyhound bus trips we saw last week. 50 cents being a fair amount of money in 1939. Or if you wanted to really spend money, you could go over and see Ripley's Believe It or Not. Lagoon of Nations. I think we'll go for about one more minute. The rotolactator, as it's rotating, it's going around. This was what made it hard to get pictures of it. Again, the film of the time, things blurred a lot. Railroads on display, or on parade. You can get your picture taken in front of a famous train, just 25 cents. Everybody is lined up here for Futurama. You can get onto the carousel, or you can get a frozen custard. This is the same stand I mentioned last week was my favorite with the father buying ice cream for his kids. Little New York, Little Old New York, Oregon Grinder. This was, again, not a great picture, blurry, but this was a big publicity thing that this sled here is on wheels because there was no ice, but somebody came all the way to the fair on a dog sled going across the United States. Just as I've wondered how many tires it took to get that car from Chile, I wondered how many dogs it took to get these folks here from Alaska on a dog sled. all sorts of different shows to entertain you. The Federal Building in the back, so they did all sorts of this dressage and other horse events out there. Here's the bus you could get on for your 50 cents. And when you came into the fair, they actually gave you a ticket that would tell you to go park in spot, say, A39. And you would drive down and go in the spot A39. It wasn't just go and find anywhere that was available. They would move you around. And they had runners that would go throughout the parking lot. And if somebody left, they would then go back to the parking attendants and tell them, hey, B72 is now free, and people would come down. I again joke all the time about you get any color car you want as long as it's black. If you look at this fleet of cars, can you imagine how hard it was finding your car at the end of the day if you didn't remember that it was in B72? Because you'd be walking up and down and they'd all pretty much look the same. If you want to orient yourself today, this building is still out at the site. It's a power building for the subway system, and you can see the train coming in. The main station would be off here to the right. So one last view of New York City. Statue looking a little bit better than we saw it before. Giant set of tires and a giant set of road makers. This thing was a giant machine that would scrape the ground down and get it all prepared for paving. And I guess we'll end here. We'll end with the woman talking to the mechanical man and his little dog Sparky down below, and you can see his ashtray is all set here for when he does his cigarette smoking. So let me stop the share. Was there an admission charge for the Perisphere in Democracy City? Yes, absolutely. You had to pay to go in, and there was a Randy Lopes. He can go to railroad. I can go to Railroads and Parade. He'll go to the donut eating contest. We can't do both, Randy?
I guess after the donut eating contest, we need to walk around. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So. Yeah, I mean, again, I'm just reading back through these here. Yeah, Ward Kimball had his own steam locomotive, and it's great. He was a big reason that Walt Disney had steam trains at Disneyland, because when Walt was having basically a mental breakdown and the doctors told him he needed to find a hobby, he got into trains. So some of the animators, like Ollie Johnston, had his own miniature train. Ollie and Frank Thomas later bought a full-size train and ran it up north. And Ward had one that he ran in his house out in the San Gabriel Valley. So amazing. You think about all the things you have. How many of us have our own steam trains, But Ward was quite a character. Carol, you worked with Ward, I believe, on, was it Transportation Pavilion?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I worked with him. I saw him as he was evaluating each scene, and he drew something and then he gave it to me. I can't remember what we did with it, but anyway, I think he signed it.
Yeah, he was, Ward was a kind of a nutcase.
Yeah.
We had one night, I had invited Frank and Ollie down to Disneyland to talk at the Disneyland Theater to the employees. And I came and met them and took them out to dinner beforehand. And they were just talking about what it was like to be at the Disney studios in the 30s and 40s, when things were just so crazy. And they said, oh yeah, Roy Williams was a nut and everything. And we thought he was the biggest, lunatic we ever met. And then we met Ward. And then Ward showed up at dinner. So we were sitting there at dinner with the three of them, and it was fascinating to just listen to them all talk about, the whole history and everything. But Ward was, Ward was very, very different. He was a different sort of guy. So any other thoughts on 39? Anybody see anything that was new or a surprise besides the donut contest? Now I'm hungry. Now I'm thinking about donuts. It's getting on lunchtime out here, so maybe I'll have a hamburger eating contest. But the 39 Fair was a big event. Really put New York City on the map, so to speak. I mean, not that it needed it in that point in time. Everybody knew New York City, but to show that you could take a garbage dump and you could change it into the world of tomorrow like that was really a message that New York could do anything. You know, that anybody could build something, but we could build something out of nothing. And it was a huge, huge success. I mean, again, it lost money. They, if they had budgeted better in 1939 and not gotten into some of the excesses, we mentioned some of that last week, that you know, the guy in charge of it just loved to spend money and entertain and do that sort of thing. If they had gone into with a better control of their overhead, it would have made money like the 1940 season was doing well. But I've always said, if you ever want to come out of a World's Fair with $1 million, there's an absolute guaranteed way to do that, and that's to go into it with 2 million. You know, World's Fairs do not make money. Oh, Baron, you have your hand up, I see.
Yeah, I was going to say that you were asking about some comments. I probably would have found myself spending some time watching them manufacture the hot dogs. I like manufacturing. I grew up in manufacturing. My father was involved in manufacturing when I was younger, and so it's a thrill for me to see things like that. And you know, although it's monotonous and you know, repetitious and just continues to go on and on, there's just always a thrill to watch something like that. You know, particularly as common as a hot dog that everybody probably doesn't, you know, takes advantage of when not thinking about how it's actually made, unless they think, you know, it's just a bunch of animal parts shoved together and that's what they're eating, which is essentially what it is. But I probably would have found myself, you know, spending a little bit more time there in awe with the manufacturing process of it. Just a comment I wanted to make.
Yeah, Randy.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Baron. When I was growing up, at the end of the street where my grandparents lived was a Canada Dry bottling plant, and they had on the corner of the building big glass windows you could look in and see, you know, the bottles going down the conveyor belt and all. My cousins and I would go and spend hours. And the big thing was, because every once in a while, like a defective bottle would be pulled out of the line automatically. It was fascinating to us. Yeah.
Yeah, we had the same sort of thing. My friend's sister's Girl Scout troop went to see the Coca-Cola plant on Long Island, and they asked if we wanted to go along. So we went, and I was probably about 13 or so. I was fascinated the speed that those bottles ran through that factory, and then they slapped the metal caps on them and throw them in a wooden box. I was really hooked by it. So Carol and I, as we've traveled, we've gone to a whole bunch of places. If you're ever up north in California, you get a chance to go to the Jelly Belly factory. You know, again, that was really fascinating to see how they make all the jelly beans. But we've gone to breweries. We've gone to back in Pennsylvania. We've gone to pretzel factories. You know, just all sorts of stuff. And you know, to me, just watching the machinery that takes the stuff and wraps it up and throws it and does it. You know, the fact that somebody can invent that and it can go so fast. Brock, you had a comment too?
Actually, a couple of comments. One on just what you were talking about. There's a show on, I think it's on the Science Channel, called How It's Made. That a lot of times will show different things being manufactured that are in a conveyor system it's quite fascinating to see, like say how it's pre-wrapped or, you know, wrapped up when it's done, but how it's baked or whatever it happens to be, how it's manufactured. The other thing was that you had asked about BF Goodrich tires. They are still around. Matter of fact, I've got a set on my truck right now. So they're still in business.
That's great. Yeah, you know, it's one of the things that struck me, Carolyn knows, I'm a pretzel fanatic. I eat pretzels nonstop. We took a tour back in Pennsylvania of one of the pretzel factories, and it astonished me because I never thought about it. They go into an oven and they come out of the oven, you know, dough goes in, pretzel comes out, and they never stop. You know, the oven is, you know, like 3 football fields long or something, but they just go in, because I just thought you put them in there, you baked them, you took them out. No, this line was going. And the thing I remember about it was all over around the factory line, there were pretzel pieces up in like all the metal framework of all the girders that held everything together. And, you know, because they're going at such a speed that a pretzel piece would fly up and would land up here and another one land over there. And, you know, I asked the gal, what happens? And I said, once a year or so, we shut the entire thing down, come with giant blowers, blow everything out of all the rafters, clean the entire thing and go again. But I mean, there were just pretzel pieces all over the place. It was, and they, of course, when you came down, we, they were glad to give you, but they were more happy to sell you pretzels. So Wayne, you had your hand up too?
Yeah, you reminded me that probably starting in the 30s, the big companies made a lot of industrial films that showed the manufacturing process. And I was always fascinated by those. And unfortunately, only a small selection have survived onto YouTube. But in the 70s, when Chicago got a new UHF station and had like a zero budget, they had a program where the Chicago Tribune film critic aired those industrial films, and they called it Films with a Mind of Their Own. And one of the most requested one was titled A Rose is a Rose, and it was about a brand of toilet that had built-in ventilation.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, so many of those industrial films, that whole company, the Jam Handy organization, that made so many of those films, they were really very well done, you know, pieces of, propaganda, selling, whatever. Jam Handy was a huge, huge company. They were like the premier company. If you needed an industrial film for Cotter Incorporated, you could go there. I was just reading in the chat, by the way, people discussing whose idea it was to put a hot dog or a sausage on a bun. And I had a real interesting experience when I was in Munich, showing how Americans are different in many ways than others. We just get used to having the hot dog bun and it's all sliced and everything, and that sort of thing. Well, I went in Munich and they were selling sausages on the side of the street, and it looked like a regular hot dog bun, right? But they didn't have it sliced. They just took the bun. They had a big piece of metal standing up, and they just rammed the bun down over the piece of metal and pushed the hot dog into the hole. And I was thinking, well, that's really good, but how am I going to get my mustard on it? So yeah, it made me again appreciate sliced American, hot dog buns.
Well, I'll end my comment with saying that my father had started. We lived in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, for 3 years when I was in kindergarten or so. And if anybody's familiar with Berlin, New Jersey, there's an old farmers market there on White Horse Pike, and my grandfather used to take me there because I'm speaking about pretzels, and that was they would have a bakery where they would manufacture hot pretzels, and not like Annie M's in the mall now, where some guy, twirls them on the counter, but, a big, long production line where they would manufacture hot pretzels. And that was always a fun thing to watch them make the hot pretzels. But after we left New Jersey and went back to Colorado Springs, he had started an ice machine manufacturing company. He had contracts with the federal government to provide ice machines for Vietnam at the time. And so I spent many a Saturday in the plant putting together parts at a penny a piece or whatever Father paid myself and my brothers to do so. But that's where I kind of got my hook on manufacturing. And I got a picture of me, around here somewhere, sitting in, standing in the factory with parts. But again, like it would be, I've always had a love for it. And so when you showed that thing about the hot dogs, I thought, yeah, I could spend a little bit of time, watching and make the hot dogs and then maybe eat about 6 or 7 of them.
Years ago, I helped with the automation system in a meat packing plant. And after that, I don't think I could eat hot dogs for a year or so. I don't know if I would have enjoyed it quite as much. So, but as Carol knows, I do love my hot dogs. So I've gotten over my meat packing days. Oh, again, oh, hey, Tom.
Hi, Bill.
Lost you the other night. All of a sudden, you were just gone.
Oh, what happened is Debbie Sampson disconnected, and I guess she was set up as the co-host. So
okay,
it knocked everybody off. But everybody jumped back on, but you. So,
I was getting paged for something else anyway. So
yeah, you look like you had.
Seconds from saying goodbye.
Yeah, it looked like you had something going on.
Yeah.
Multitasking. So talking about Ward Kimball, do you remember which DVD had the Ward Kimball kind of Easter egg? I want to say it was Parent Trap, but I'm not sure. But it was something, remember how they used to have these little things where you hold a button down, do this, do that, and then this Easter egg would pop up, or you highlighted something on the screen and clicked on it and an Easter egg would pop up. But it was really cool. And it was Ward Kimball with his trains and all of his toys and just really cool. Plus there were those family museum, Disney Family Museum pieces. And of course, Ward Kimball was one of the stars of that. Do you remember that series?
Yeah. It's funny. There was a fellow named Lou Debney, who was one of Walt's right-hand men, and
right.
John Debney is now a famous, composer. And Lou and I got along really well. He was just amazed that anybody cared, anybody my age, because I think I was 24 when I started working for the Mouse. Anybody my age knew or cared about that old stuff. So we used to go walk in the Zorro sets on the back lot and talk stuff. And one day, he was walking around and goes, I wonder where it's buried. And I go, what's that? He goes, oh, let me tell you a story. Ward did a film. He was going to do it for a TV show because he did all the avant-garde, stuff for Tomorrowland and that sort of thing. But he did one film that they got halfway through, and then Walt said he wanted to see the film. They screened it in a screening room, and Walt basically got up and walked out on it. Didn't say a word, just got up and walked out. And the word came down the next day, the project was dead, don't do anything with it. And I said, so what happened to it? And Lou said, well, the story is that Walt was so upset about it that they took it and they buried it out on the back lot. So that it would never be seen again. They just threw it into a garbage heap and buried it. I said, was that bad? Well, it was that bad that they took the two guys that knew where it was buried and shot them so they could never tell anybody where it was.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, and they're in Pirates of the Caribbean. I've seen them.
But I went into the archives and I looked up the production number, and usually there's a folder of, all sorts of stuff and everything. And it's basically the production number just has a sheet of paper that said, from the accounting department, production number so-and-such is closed, no additional charges, this number will be accepted. That was the whole thing. So I don't know what the hell Ward did, but Lou had so many stories about what it was like working with him. He was a real character. Well, I hope people enjoyed their trip back to 1939. Next week, I will not be with you. Next week is the all-you-can-eat pancake breakfast. So at the police station. So I will not be seeing how many pancakes, how many I'll eat. I'm actually going to be working the event, so we'll be there. But we'll do our version of how many donuts we can eat, Randy. So if you want to come up next week, come up and see how many pancakes you can eat.
Did you say it's at the Academy or?
No, it's at our local station.
Oh, it's your local station.
Yeah,
okay.
Devonshire Station. And if you ever want to go to the Academy, we can meet there for lunch someday. They have a really 1950s vintage coffee shop. That's it's you step in there, it's like you're expecting to see Dwight Eisenhower walk in there any particular time. Yeah. And they serve a mean patty melt. It's a fun spot.
Is Carol still on?
She's talking to our daughter who's up in Seattle, so you can see the back of her head.
Because I was going to have our little guy say hi to her.
I would lift up mine, who's sleeping here peaceful in my lap right now. So
that's what he's trying to do.
We just got ours groomed on Thursday. So one of the neighbors, look, the dogs look so nice. Well, now they do. An hour and a half from now, particularly our little terrier, her hair just grows. You can watch it visibly just grow. It's insane. So we'll be back in 2 weeks and working on the agenda for that. But again, again, if anybody's in the San Fernando Valley and you would like to eat pancakes, you know, here's your property. Leslie's not far. You know, you come up and have a pancake.
That's right. What time next Saturday?
It starts at 8 in the morning and goes until noon.
Okay.
So, and we're giving tours of the police station, and the SWAT team should be there with all their big rifles and all the rest of it. So we do it every year. Basically, it's a fundraiser. The city of LA only, you know, provides the absolute bare necessities for things. And we have a very good booster group that does things like provide a weight room and stuff for the officers. There's actually a room full of cots, for example, that if you finish your shift and it's really late and you got to go to court the next morning, you can just go in there and, you know, get some sleep rather than drive all the way home and all the way back. So they provide all sorts of odds and ends. And we have a big pasta dinner. In the spring, we do a big pancake breakfast. And in the fall, we do a big pasta dinner. So with COVID, oh, Joey, you're there. Joey, you were going to show us a surprise. I just see you're in text.
Yeah,
some sort of surprise you wanted to show?
Yeah, I'll show it to you right now. See if I can get it. It's a little piece of, if you can see this little crystal, or see if I can light it up for you a little bit better. There we go. This was sent to me by a friend, a woman named Maria, and I'm going to read what she wrote. This piece of pink glass slag is from the New York World's Fair West Virginia Pavilion. They had a glass blowing exhibit of pilgrim glass in the pavilion. Outside, they had decorative glass rocks or slags on the ground around the pavilion, probably cast-offs of the glass blowing exhibit. My mother was very tight with money and refused to buy me a souvenir, so I borrowed, in quotations, one of the rock slags for my souvenir of the World's Fair. I have kept this rock slag for years as a memory and hope I could pass it on to you. It's a pretty rose pink color. It has sharp edges and is very crudely cut. Today, they would not have something like this in the open, as children could cut themselves, but back then it was different. So this is an actual piece that she picked up. I guess what they did is they threw all the mistakes and all the waste into a pit in the front of the pavilion. And I'm looking for pictures of it, but maybe Bill, maybe you have it.
To look for it, but I wanted to point out to you the statute of limitations doesn't expire until next year. So you're going to have to turn that to me as a duly authorized member of the law. So that's really, I'll have to look for it. I remember the glass blowing exhibit really, really well. My mother really loved blown glass. I remember going there, but I'll have to look for the slag stuff. That's really cool. That's
it's interesting. Yeah, it really is interesting, and I'm honored that she passed it on to me. So anyway, great show. I got to run.
Good.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks.
All right.
Again, we're back in 2 weeks, and again, if anybody would like more information about restoring films or anything, I'm going to be putting more on my website. But reach out to me. This Film 9 I mentioned, and I do not get a cut on it because it's free. It also has the facilities to upscale videotapes and try to do frame lifts to try to make them look more suitable for today's TV sets. So if you have an old VHS tape of the family, running around the Disneyland or something, you want to try to make it look nicer. It does very nice stuff. It's and again, the ability to take out the scratches and the dirt and fix the color it's one of the neatest tools that I've come across in a number of years. After I put it through Film 9, I then take it into an editor and I try to take out all the splices, because they would take 2 pieces of film, glue it together, and you lose about 4 frames where they've done that. And I try to digitally take most of that stuff out and everything. But
Bill,
yeah,
you just said VHS. Did you mean VHS?
Yeah, you
okay.
Take a VHS cool. or an old beta tape and put it in there. Film 9 has a setting. Are you doing interlaced video, non-interlaced video? Again, what's the frame rate of it? And then you can go off and try to get something nicer. Again, if it's a really crappy thing with tracking issues or terrible whatever, it can only do so much, but it can make an old tape look more high defish, you know, and upscaling than you know, than the original, you know, format. Do I use Handbrake? Yes, I do. The Handbrake is another interesting software tool, another free piece. What I use Handbrake for a lot is doing conversions from one format to another. I also take the videos that when I'm done generating them out of my video nearline editing, they generally come out to giant lengths. So like the World's Fair video we saw today came out to about I'm trying to think, 5 or 7 gigabytes in size. I generally don't save them at that speed, that size online on my computer. I'll burn them off to a DVD or a Blu-ray disc to keep the uncompressed version, but then I use Handbrake to drop it down to a lower bitrate MP4 file, and that will take it from about 5 gigabytes down to 700 megabytes. And that way I can then keep that on my hard drive for instant access. And I still have the other one, you know, if needed. So Handbrake's really good. Yeah, Leslie, the pancakes a la mode. I was actually thinking about you that if you brought up a little pint of ice cream, you know, we don't serve a la mode, but you do get pancakes, sausage, coffee, orange juice, all that sort of stuff. But bring some ice cream. We can have them a la mode. I still haven't had ice cream in over a year.
You.
What?
I'm going to Disneyland today and I'm going to get some ice cream.
Oh, man.
I just had ice cream while we were doing this. But we have sugar-free ice cream. So
yeah.
I just think that, yeah, you'd be, well, it's better than nothing.
Carol
a lot
actually
better. Some of it's really good.
Carol found some Mickey bars last week in the deep recesses of the deep freeze, and it was like, oh, tempting. But no, March 26th last year. Haven't had ice cream, candy, soda. I'm still working on it. So that's
I
why
can do without the candy and the soda, but it's the ice cream.
Yeah. Well, again, appreciate everybody joining, and I'll be back in 2 weeks, and hope everybody has a good time in between.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
I'll look for you on Thursday, Tom.
Oh, yeah. Me too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.